listening to the House by the Video Store podcast.
There's no more room in hell. The dead will walk near.
We have such sights to show you.
I kick ass for the Lord.
Praise God! Give away!
Welcome to the House by Video Store podcast. I'm your host, William, and joining me today will be Sean.
Hello.
And that'll be it. We'll be discussing the new film that's available on video-on-demand services currently, but I'm sure it'll be widely available soon here, and it's Better Watch Out, which is a movie that we will give our brief, like when we get to that section, we'll give our brief spoiler-free thoughts, and then jump into the spoilers, because that's a movie that really you should see before you read too much about it. Because oftentimes, like, when I was at the theater recently, because Julie's been making fun of me for this, like, when trailers for Star Wars comes on, I literally put my hands over my ears and close my eyes. And she just, like, laughs at me. But it's like, no, I don't want to know what's going to happen in this movie that I want to pay to see. I'd rather everything be a surprise. Yeah. Because something that I know that I'm going to go in and watch, I'd rather just go in and be surprised by it. Because even the best cut trailer still usually give things away. The only thing that I will even watch at all for, like, Star Wars is, like, I could not avoid it at one point because I was somewhere and I caught, like, the sub 1 minute teaser that literally is like one shot. So I saw that and I was like, well, that doesn't spoil anything. I don't want to see anything else, because even, like, they had a behind the scenes thing that ran about Star Wars, like, before the movie started. And I was like, damn it, why do they keep showing footage? I don't want to know anything. Yeah. And, you know, in this day and age, like, even action figures in the middle of the aisle at Target are spoilers because they're out, you know, a month before the movie. And it's like, oh, well, the fact that this character is wearing this costume means something. So, yeah, so Better Watch Out is a movie that I think, I mean, we'll give, like, just basic, like, should you see it, should you not, basic thoughts without giving any spoilers, and then go into a spoiler discussion. But, yeah, we'll get to that later. But before that, we can go through some recent news and things we've been watching. And also, too, just to kind of get feedback from the audience, people actually listen to the show, as we've been, you know, within our own, like, House by Video Store stuff we've been discussing on the podcast, the format and the structure of it, and just trying to figure out a way to kind of streamline the production process and still, you know, put something out people enjoy and want to hear, while at the same time maximizing our use of time. So the things we kind of been talking about doing, just trying to get feedback from people who actually listen to this, what they'd rather see. So the current format is we talk about recent news and things we've been watching, and then a feature movie. We do old stuff, we do new stuff, kind of varies. So the idea is that we would continue to so one idea is we would continue to have a new episode come out weekly, but instead of recording them the way we do now, where we just record them each week. So we usually don't bank anything, and ahead of time we just record it. Like, we record it on Sunday, we put it out on Tuesday, so the news is relatively fresh. So the idea we're thinking about doing is possibly recording and banking, you know, a number of episodes at a time, covering, you know, mostly just older films, that we would then just release those episodes weekly. So you would still see something from us weekly. We would just have episodes where we just discuss the one specific movie that's the, you know, title movie of that episode, and then just some of the things we've been watching. And we really wouldn't have news coverage because it would get so out of sync and be, you know, old news that it really wouldn't make much sense to hear something, you know, 2 or 3 weeks later about a news story.
Unless, like, and we talked before, unless it was, like, come up a natural conversation.
Yeah. Or,
you know, like, just in the beginning, if we just happen to bring up something, but we probably won't be using it as, like, an update to the audience about, like, what's current. Just because, yeah, some of it will be, like, pretty dated, if it's like 3 weeks out or something like that.
Yeah, so the idea is we would do something like that. So, I mean, we could still, like, you know, like Sean said, mention news that's relevant to things that we're talking about or that we just want to bring up ourselves. But we would just record the episodes, you know, multiple ones at a time, you know, 2 or 3 or whatever the schedule work out to do, so that we have a little bit more free time. And then you would still have an episode coming out each week, and you would still have episodes that were recorded in person versus over Skype or something like that. And we would still, you know, recommend things to watch and check out and things like that. And then more relevant new things, we would probably just do YouTube only videos that we could just record whenever we thought of it or whenever we wanted to.
Yeah. So like any of the big new releases, we would do a video on that and it would come out as soon as possible.
Yes.
That way they wouldn't be held for the podcast. And if people like wanted to see it in theaters,
Yeah.
they would get it right away, as soon as we were able to record and put that out. And because some people I think search for that stuff and they just want to
Yeah.
hear about the new movie. They don't want to hear our news, or especially if they're not like a normal listener.
Yeah.
I mean, also too, I guess if we really wanted to, if we had the bandwidth, we could put that on the podcast thing too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we could just,
Yeah, I mean, we could figure,
we could maybe put that in audio format, or like, if you listen to our podcast in audio only, let us know if you would miss that new coverage or not, and if we should put out an audio version of that.
Yeah.
We would have to, make sure we are aware of it being for both formats, which is a
Yeah.
little bit different sometimes.
Yeah, it's pretty much just trying to get a little bit of feedback from, everyone who actually listens to the show, what they'd rather see.
And it seems like all of our feedback comes through YouTube on the
Yeah.
video. So,
Yeah, because like the email, we haven't really got many emails through that. We got a few earlier on.
and no really Facebook comments on the
Yeah,
podcast.
Facebook
so.
we don't get too many Facebook comments, and then the episodes, not to get too much into how the sausage is made, but like the download numbers for the podcast, usually the more well-known franchise films do pretty well. They'll get multiples of downloads compared to some of the smaller movies, the more obscure stuff, and the YouTube numbers are similar to that too, where some episodes, so I think Green Inferno and maybe the Cabin Fever remake and some of the videos like that over time have gotten a decent amount of views for what they are. Like 2,000 views on some of those, or maybe more. I haven't checked it. But so some of those videos would do well. And people who find us primarily through YouTube search, maybe if we had those a little bit more geared towards just that specific movie and things like that. So we have videos that are more video focused. Like maybe that's preferable to having it be in the back half of a podcast.
And they would be a little bit shorter too.
Yeah, a little bit shorter.
Our podcast would be shorter. So, I don't know if you would prefer a shorter one or not, but it would end up being that.
Well,
but ideally, we may be putting out a little bit more content possibly if we did separate videos on like new releases.
And two, the other aspect of that is we did videos that were more timely, then it could be stuff that had a little bit higher production value or more editing behind it, because on these video podcasts, we usually record them and I don't do too much beyond just slap a filter on it or a light just so it doesn't look like it came straight out of the camera, and I put the audio to it, and that's kind of it. And we would continue to do that for the normal releases of the podcast, but for the videos we would do kind of YouTube only, we actually do cuts and cut it up a little bit and take some of the ums, likes, and some of the other things out. If it flows well enough, and spend a little more time maybe pulling in graphics and different things that would maybe add to the experience a little bit, because that's tough to do on a 2 hour or an hour plus recording. Try to go back and find, because we did that on a few of them and it just became a little bit too cumbersome to go and try to find images that are relevant to what you're talking about over the course of an hour and a half podcast. So that's the kind of like one idea is we would have the podcast being more relegated to just strict discussions of specific older films with kind of other stuff sprinkled in.
And it doesn't have to be old, like, even if it came out like last year or something, it's fine. It's not necessarily retro films or anything like that.
We're not just going to be talking about Vincent Price films or stuff.
Yeah, just not like if it's, right now as it works, we'll do an older film unless there's a new release, like Better Watch Out, which even now that's a little bit dated by a few weeks.
Well, I think that has festival reviews going back over a year.
Yeah. So even though that's a little dated, like that film we would have done as a separate video.
Yeah.
And this podcast would have been on another Christmas film, Die Hard, as everybody points out,
Yeah, I mean, so the idea would be that we would have maybe, overall a little bit more content, and then the actual podcast episodes would probably be a little bit shorter and be more focused on a specific movie, and then just before that, things that, we're recommending to check out. Because I do think that what we've been watching, we have gotten feedback that people do like hearing us recommend things that they haven't seen. So I think that's just the idea is just trying to separate out, because it is tough every weekend to find time to record these podcast episodes. And we used to do them on Skype, but my new computer, currently my microphone doesn't work. So.
And it doesn't ever work well for Derek either.
Yeah.
So.
And the quality of them sometimes is pretty bad just because we have dropouts and issues, as opposed to in person, they all sound, at least decent.
So what was the other option?
The
on
other
podcast?
option
I already
is,
forgot.
kind of doing it that way. So you would still see weekly content from us, just the format might be a little bit different. Or we would record the podcast as we do now and have all the same type of information. We would just record them bi-weekly. So you would only see something from us once every 2 weeks. And it would be the same format now. And then we would still try to do videos and things like that on YouTube. But I just think that, I think for most people, they're like, I'm just trying to think of, from my perspective, like, would I prefer to see, just one longer podcast every 2 weeks, or, a little bit shorter ones every week? Like, I just want to get feedback if anybody has any very strong opinions in either direction, because I think...
I've been thinking about, we've talked about breaking out those new releases too in separate videos, so I think I kind of am leaning towards, again, we'll listen to feedback, but I would like to do probably the bank a few do new releases as a separate video and just see how that does, see if people like that better. If not, because on the newer stuff, maybe you just want to watch that video and make a decision now instead of listening to the rest of the podcast,
Well, and two, like if we do some of the ideas we're talking about in terms of doing, a little bit shorter video content for some of the reviews, they might be a little bit easier for us to get guests on to do some of those. And not just, people we've worked with before, because I'm trying to figure out just ways to make it a little bit easier. And then two, especially doing shorter form content like that, if we go to horror conventions, people we run into there, we might be able to nab them and get some quick content from things like that. So just pretty much the idea is, like, would you like to see content from us every week, even if the format changes a little bit, or would you like to see us do what we're continuing to do, but just you see it once every 2 weeks instead of every week? So if you have any strong feelings in your direction, let us know. But
and thanks for the comments too. I know we just got a couple more comments on YouTube about people enjoying the podcast.
Yeah.
So yeah, we always appreciate those. Just to know, like, okay, this is what they like, this is what they don't like.
Yeah, and it's always nice to know people actually listen, because you see view and download numbers. Like, the downloads, with YouTube, you can go in and see what the average watch time is and, how many hours or minutes for watch stuff. Something on the podcast downloads, you can't really see that. You can't see you see the number of downloads, but you have no idea if they just downloaded it and didn't listen. Because I know some people, as I've done myself, as I'll subscribe to a podcast and it downloads it each week, and then I'll look at what the topic is and I'm kind of busy, I'm not going to listen to that. So
yeah, I have today, all of a sudden my phone updated, and I had like 8 or 9 podcasts that update it for some reason. And yeah, I just glance at them, I'm like, there's a lot of things to listen to and watch. A lot of things fight for your attention. So
a lot of content.
Yeah.
out
So
there.
maybe if our podcast were shorter, it would help people out on some ends. For me, I listen to like one podcast a week. And even now I'm like, have not listened to it recently because it's a video one. It's Giant Bomb, their video one. And then the Giant Beast cast, but it's hard sometimes. And I like watching the video version, but instead of watching like 5 of them, I watch one that's like 3.5 hours. You know what I mean? It takes me like all week to watch, but that's how I prefer to consume stuff. I know some people like to do multiple things and get content from everywhere.
Yeah, because a lot of our episodes now run like usually over an hour, so like between an hour and a half, sometimes longer. And if we change the format up a little bit, the episodes would probably all run under an hour and be shorter.
Yeah, for sure.
And things like that. So I just know, just want to get some feedback as to what people, because I think the main things I've taken away people do like is when we recommend things to watch they may have not seen, and then just talking about whatever the movie is specifically. So, just if there's any feedback you have, you can comment on YouTube or send us an email.
And also, too, we're getting towards the end of the year for the end of the year podcast where we talk about our favorite stuff out of the year. And we'll kind of, rank them, and a general ranking of like, hey, here's at least like our favorites, sequel or something, or, our best overall horror film. If there's any films this year that were like your standout films, let us know in the comments of like, hey, this film isn't talked about a lot, or we didn't cover it, or we haven't talked about it. You guys really need to see this. There's some in theaters that, like Mother, I haven't been able to see that. Life, none of us saw that.
Yeah.
I know nobody was over the moon. Some people seem to like that quite a bit. I think that's on demand now, or it's going to be soon, because I was browsing through. So if I can get a chance, I may try to check that out before the end of the year.
There's a number of things we all need to get checked out before the end of the year stuff, because this has been a pretty strong year for horror, or at least a pretty varied year in what we've seen. And you know, and like in some years it's been tough to figure out what, you know, was the horror movie of the year for us, but this year it might be tough just because there's a number of things to choose from. But yeah, so let us know if you have any feedback. Like I said, you know, the YouTube comments are always great, and we always do read those. Or you can send us an email at podcast@housepadvideostore.com. So let us know either of those ways if you have strong opinions. And two, it's not something that's set in stone. We can course correct down the road if we don't think what we're doing is working, but try and get feedback for what people are interested in.
Yeah, I mean, we basically
to.
set a format how many ever years ago when we started this, and have stuck to that format for the most part.
Yeah.
And we're doing it every single week. We've only missed, you know, we missed the 1 week when you were out of
1
town.
week, and there's a few times we've banked episodes ahead of time.
Yeah, and I've missed some episodes just from various things, but yeah, pretty much stuck to that. So experimentation's good, change is good. We're heading into a new year.
Yeah,
we can mix it up a little bit.
Yeah, and then too, like you know, so just kind of moving along. Some news like on our stuff. So there's like a 99% chance you'll be seeing a short film from us in December that will be barely related to Christmas at all, depending on the imagery we use. Not sure yet. But that was when the week that you're off, I was in Portland. I went down with Julie and visited some of her family and did sightseeing and hiking and looked around because I hadn't been to Portland before. Fun city, but we shot part of a short film there. We just kind of started in the moment, like, oh, while we're here, we should shoot a short film. So I downloaded the Filmic Pro app for my iPhone, and then I could download 4K, or I could record 4K video at 24 frames a second and change the settings and stuff. So I did record some footage there, and then we also shot some footage back here. We're going to shoot some more footage to try to tie it all together in a cohesive short film that should be out this month. That was just kind of a on the spot like thing we decided to do. So hopefully there'll be more time to, or like I'll try to get into doing more just like experimental short stuff that's not as big time investment as some of our other stuff. Because there's other things we talked about, like Chad has some shorts he wants to work on.
Yeah, I think he just finished another script.
And then we've talked about, you know, writing out, you know, for a feature to get that in motion. And then, too, I'm just getting new camera equipment, so I'm just going to try to test some of it out and shoot stuff to see what comes of it. But yeah, so you'll probably see that. The other announcement, I don't really know if we're allowed to say, because our short film will be shared by somebody in the next month. Well, I guess
yeah, I mean, just hold it, I guess. It's out there. What do you think?
I don't know. Like, it's not like super. I mean, it's already, you can watch it on YouTube. It's gonna be shared by somebody else, and just so keep an eye out on our social media pages. We'll definitely be talking about that, and we'll link to it when it actually comes out. But so after the slasher, we'll be getting shared by at least one place.
It's essentially part of a series now, right? Kind of.
Yeah. So we'll have some more details on that soon. So keep an eye on that. Yeah. So it's kind of like the news on our stuff, and then, you know, like other general horror news. There's not a lot of. I know I always say this, but like there's things like people talk about the same crap all the time. Like, I saw some like horror pages sharing stuff about like Freddy vs. Jason 2. It's like, well, that's never going to happen based on the Jason rights. That was just somebody sharing like a poster. But like what kills me is you write an original post and you share a link to a podcast or whatever. You get a couple likes maybe. That's it. Somebody shares the same damn picture of Freddy or Jason and says, what do you think about this? And it gets 300 likes and a bunch of comments.
People like Jason.
But yeah, like there's always stuff like that. But
so something I had posted, I think last time, or I don't know, or maybe right after the last podcast, was the Chiller Network.
The Chiller Network is no more, or it's not going to.
Yeah, I think it's still up currently.
It will be no more soon, and that was kind of. I think NBC Universal owned it. Mm-hmm. So that's the network where their only original series, I think, was the show Slasher, which I did a video review of the first season that's been getting a lot of traction recently for some reason. And then I actually watched all of season 2, and maybe I'll do a video on that soon. But, you know, my general thoughts on season 2, I know I mentioned some of it before, but I finally finished it. And it's like, so the first one, you know, a lot of people in the comments on that have talked about how the acting, or somebody said that the acting wouldn't be convincing for a porn. In the comments about the first season. And the second season, I was like, maybe the first season, since it followed a familiar slasher trope of like, you know, there's a family and then there's like a brutal murder at the house, and then 30 years later there's like fallout from it. So essentially the same very general bare bones concept that drives Halloween, Friday the 13th. It's like the mic on my face, and a bunch of other slashers that all follow that kind of prototype of like, here's an urban legend or true story of what happened 20, 30 years ago. Prom night. I mean, there's all kinds of movies where there's something happened in the past, and then the characters deal with the fallout in the future or in the present as you're watching it. And maybe it's the fact that it fell into those familiar tropes. I didn't dislike it overall as much because it's like, well, it's just kind of like stretching what would be in a normal movie out into like multiple episodes. Season 2 was one that was set in like a snowy location, like at a ski lodge, and then it jumped back and forth to like a summer camp of like things that happened in the past, because it shows stuff that happened like, in the quote unquote present and then like 5 years prior. And it's terrible. I hate it. There were some interesting things throughout, but there was like a lot of CG kills. So there's a lot of over the top, very brutal, very mean spirited gore, but a lot of it was CG. Like somebody would get a chainsaw in the gut, and it was just...
Which horror fans love. Chiller Network's like, I know what horror fans love. CGI blood.
So it feels like their idea was, we need to make this show... Because I know like MTV Scream and like Scream Queens, people criticize them, and we probably even did at times for like the amount of kills they had per episodes not really stacking up enough. Mm-hmm. Slasher went in the opposite direction and had like characters that were brutally raped, where you saw like blood streaming down them, and people were burnt alive, and all these really brutal deaths occurred. But I cared nothing for the characters at all, because they're all terrible people. And the only character that was even slightly interesting, they didn't really care to use in an interesting way. And setting it in like a summer camp, like lodge area, but in the winter when it snowed in, it just wasn't entertaining. And
does it seem like they had less money this time, or
I'd say about the same.
Yeah.
Because before,
was the first season, did they have a lot of CGI kills?
They had some CGI in it too.
Yeah.
In the first season, maybe just because it was a while back when I watched it, it seemed less egregious back then than it does this new season did. And then when they did the reveal of who the killer was, because the entire season there's like a killer and you don't know what they look like because they're like covered up, and then you don't find out who the killer is until the end of the show. And when they finally got around to what the ending was, like, oh, it's like the same ending as like 50 other things. And there wasn't a lot of foreshadowing for it. And the ending fell into the same trap as a lot of the other pop culture elements or TV shows or movies that use that ending fall into, without really spoiling what it is. So you have this ending and you see it and you're like, if I rewatch the show, does any of it hang together? Because I think this is just for shock value.
Yeah.
But I really don't care to watch the show again or ever again, so I'm not going to.
And you're talking about the first season?
The second season.
Second season, okay.
The first season was just standard enough, and you're like, oh, it was, in my opinion, no worse than MTV Scream and Scream Queens, because that Scream Queen season 1, I enjoyed it to a point, then I just viciously hated it because of the way that it went. Season 2 was so bad I couldn't even stand to watch it, and then it got canceled. And Slasher didn't feel any worse than that. It was obviously felt lower budgeted than Scream Queens because that was like a major network show, but it didn't feel vastly inferior.
Okay.
The second season just felt even more hollow and no identity. And it's so like basically like the first season was taking a familiar slasher film and expanding it out into 8 hours or however many, from something that could have been an hour and a half to 2 hours. And then this new season felt like expanding out like a bad horror film that I would not have any interest in at an hour and a half and just making it last however many episodes it was. So, I mean, it's admirable that you try to take something like a slasher, make a series out of it, and go for the hardcore, you know, gore and the things that horror fans want. But to me, it felt so lifeless and flat that I really couldn't get invested in any of it. And then the only character that like out of the entire ensemble cast, like one of the few characters I actually like, well, that's an interesting character arc at least. They're like, we're more interested in this other stuff.
I mean, not to say like, oh, this is how to make it better. I'm just thinking about this from a perspective of what I would do, just because we think about making films and all that stuff all the time.
Yeah.
For me personally, and not that I would be good at writing this, but if I was involved in a show, I would try to get people involved that could do the writing. I would almost like, if I wanted to set up a show where I had basically a lot of people to get killed, because it was like that slasher genre.
Yeah.
I would try to find a writer that was really good at doing mysteries and like make it a really good whodunit.
Yeah.
And not one that was hollow. Like I couldn't really pull that off that well. I don't think I could.
Yeah.
So instead of me, like I would probably try to figure out a path for the story and then find some writers that are really good mystery writers and say, okay, you guys handle like the meat of the show.
Yeah.
And we'll sprinkle in sprinkling kills throughout, and it'll have a satisfying story and conclusion. And then we'll also get the splatter all throughout the entire season as well.
Yeah. And just, it would just be like it felt kind of like, so without even spoiling this and telling you which season, there was a season of Dexter that ended with a character very similar. Mm-hmm. And at least in that situation, even though later season Dexter to me just completely fell apart and I couldn't watch it pretty much, and then the ending I hated, but at least up to that point you had some investment in the characters and you had really good actors, so there was at least those elements that kept you in it. And in this one, it wasn't that the actors were bad, it's just the material was so one note, and the characters, like in the flashbacks, just like absolutely flew off the handle and acted kind of unrealistically. And then in the present, everybody was, kind of too easily brushed off what happened in the past for you to like them as a person in the present. Mm-hmm. So then it's like, well, if you don't like anybody and there's really no protagonist, then you are really only rooting for the killer to kill them in gruesome ways. But if the killer is essentially just a person in a like ski suit where you can't see their face with no personality, then there's not much drawing you to it, even like you would with those Friday the 13th sequels.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, well, how's Jason going to kill the teens this time? With this one, it's like a blank slate of a character that has no personality aside from the gruesome kills. So it was just something that I would not necessarily recommend you go out and watch. To me, as a step down in quality from the first season, and there's so much content out there at this point that, I mean, maybe you can check out the first episode and see if you are into that style and milieu and everything.
It seemed like some of the comments on our YouTube page for the review you did of season 1.
Yeah.
Some people were not, there were a lot of people that were not fans of that show.
A lot of people seem to hate it now.
Seems like if you don't like that first season, don't bother with the second.
Yes. Yeah, if you didn't even like the first season, the second one to me doesn't really add anything. And even some of the interesting avenues it opens up with some of the characters, it doesn't really go down.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Slasher Season 2 is something I only really watch just to complete it, to talk about on the podcast and maybe do a video review of. But if, like, there's different shows, like, for the podcast, I'm sure, like, you and Nicole do the same thing. Like, when you say, oh, I'm going to watch this for the podcast, and she makes a decision if she wants to invest the time or not to watch it, or you make the call, like, do I think she'll like this?
Normally she has no choice.
Yeah.
I'm like, we're watching this.
Yeah.
But no, normally it's like, okay, we'll watch like 5 things, and not in a row, but like throughout. Okay, we'll watch all these things we both agree on, and then like, okay, I need to watch this one for the podcast. Then I'll watch it. Yeah. So or there are some films right now that I have lined up I want to watch that I'm like, I'll just watch that alone.
Yes. But the Slasher Season 2 was something, once I watched the second, I was like, yeah, Julie's not going to like this.
Yeah.
Derek wouldn't finish this. I didn't think you would like that. So it's just one of those things where you don't have a lot of time in this day and age. The thing I've ran into as an issue is like Netflix. Sometimes there's too much stuff out there between Netflix and Amazon Prime and other streaming services to watch everything. So if you watch a TV series that really doesn't pull you in at all in the first episode, then you're like, well, I really don't want to waste my time on this entire season. Because like Stranger Things Season 2, I burned through that because I was excited to see what happened next. This show is more of like, well, there's only this many left, so maybe. So yeah, that's something I wouldn't necessarily recommend checking out. And I guess there's not a lot of other important news.
I mean, yeah, there was nothing that's really stood out, which I think too, that's why it's easier to drop off some of the news stuff. Like I enjoy talking about the news and the relevant stuff, but
did we talk about the Halloween 2018, the shooting got pushed back?
No, we did not.
It got delayed. So the shooting was supposed to be starting already, but it got pushed back to like January of 2018. So still theoretically on target to hit their release date, because shooting if it has a shooting schedule similar to a lot of the other Blumhouse stuff of like 2 to 3 weeks and all that, and there's not a lot of effects work in it or CG or anything like that, it's mostly all practical. I don't see it being a problem for them to hit an October release date if they're shooting in January, because like TV series start shooting at the beginning of the year and come out at the end of the year, and that's multiple episodes. So and two, like the Blumhouse method, a lot of that stuff seems to be, at least a Get Out and different things, they'll shoot pretty, limited time frames. And granted, David Gordon Green's a more accomplished director.
And this is a franchise I sure as hell, I would think for me as a producer, if I was like Jason Blum and what's his brother's name? Doesn't he have a brother?
I don't know.
I thought he had a brother for some reason. I thought it was 2 brothers. Maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, if that was my production company and I was handling Halloween, I would think, okay, very smart with how I handle my films and the budgets. This film, I'll take a bath on. I'll extend the shooting dates. You know what I mean? Like, I would give this film more time, and even if it ended up costing me more money, and I'm not saying spend a lot, but even if I was like, okay, this may only break even, I would kind of do that just to get the fans to not attack me, and because I'd want to make a good film. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
well, when I saw the news come out that the shooting got delayed, there was immediately comments like, oh, well, maybe they're reacting to all the public backlash to people saying, David Gordon Green and Danny McBride talking about how, and John Carpenter talking about how it's going to disregard everything past the first movie. And they're like, well, maybe that was such a negative backlash that they instead decided to retool some of the script a little bit and put those hooks back in. I don't necessarily think it's that. I think that would be a longer delay. I think it's probably more of just logistical casting, locations, probably a little, more low-key things like that. Because Jason Blum had stated on his life the movie would hit the release date. So
yeah, he doesn't have a brother. I don't know why I thought that. I don't know why I always thought
maybe it's because I know on Creep they worked with Mark Duplass and he has a brother. There's
I knew
Duplass
he did.
brothers.
I don't know why I thought there was 2 brothers. So Jason Blum, it's all on that dude. And I knew his name was the only one I ever heard.
Yeah.
I just thought maybe another dude was, kind of behind the scenes.
So whenever the movie actually starts shooting, there's more concrete information and more casting information, because I think, was the Judy Greer stuff confirmed or just?
I think that was, they were going after her. Not for sure though.
So that really wasn't even confirmed. So aside from Jamie Lee Curtis, there's not a confirmed cast list of exactly who's in it. So it could just be logistical elements like that. And if your plan for the movie is to be done shooting, by the end of February, to be able to have it edit and locked, in summer or something, maybe that's their plan all along. So as long as they get it done by a certain date, it's fine.
Yeah.
Who knows? I mean, but on a feature like that, I wouldn't think that the edit would take as long. Because I think that, especially too, someone like David Gordon Green, who's done multiple films, it's not like a first-time filmmaker. He probably has a pretty strong vision. So I would not imagine they're going to do as much test audience type stuff as they would with...
And being used to working a little faster in TV already.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because I know he's directed TV episodes, and Danny McBride has been heavily involved with stuff.
Danny McBride directed the second to last or the third to last episode of Vice Principals as well. The new season 2.
So we'll have, as more information comes out, we'll discuss it. But I'm excited to see what happens with it. At this point, though, it does feel kind of like it's just an alternate dimension version of the character in the franchise. Because if they really do abandon all of the stuff from after the first film and don't even acknowledge the second one, then to me, the Halloween franchise almost enters into comic book territory where you have so many iterations of this story and so many resets and reboots that there's really no real continuity. It doesn't matter.
They can just scream it and say, 2 or 4 through the rest of them were all films based on the tragedy, They could just do, I'm not saying they would, but they could always do that and write around it and say, oh yeah, that was all just, magic bullshit and everything, with the occult So they could always ride around it that way.
well, too,
and kind of throw it under the bus.
Or it almost feels like the Batman movies. So, like before the Christopher Nolan series, you had the two Tim Burton films that between the two of them, they like in the second film, it referenced like one thing from the first film, like Vicky Vale. And then they had Joel Schumacher come in and make Batman Forever. And it was a vastly different movie. The universe felt different. Is a different actor playing the character. Who knows? There was really no reference to continuity from prior films, and they changed a lot of stuff up. And then Batman and Robin, went even further in a direction. So maybe it feels like those where they just kind of ignore what came before.
I mean, honestly, I know there's lore there, yeah, but at the same time, yeah, it's a character who has transcended beyond those movies. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's part of pop culture. Michael Myers is. So it's probably just taking that character and kind of that base story and making a good movie out of it.
Yeah.
And they don't want to be shackled by those other storylines that went off in a million different directions that had no involvement from John Carpenter or ties to the original vision or the feel of the character or anything like that. I know it has its fans, but
I mean, all the movies that have a fan base or a fandom around them, but I don't think anybody's going to be really that upset they're abandoning the stuff that was set up in Halloween Resurrection.
No,
yeah. So that was kind of the big news element. But
went to the George Miller thing where the Mad Max sequel is delayed or whatever. I guess he's suing Warner Brothers, I believe it is. I mean, that's who put out the film.
Yeah.
Suing Warner, was it Warner Brothers and Roadshow? I don't know. Anyway, he's suing them for, I guess, payment that he didn't get for him and his production company, I guess for pre-production also, because you'd always heard of this film was like so many years in the making, where they did the giant storyboard books, where they made the huge like Bible that was everything storyboarded, all the pre-production work. So I guess they didn't have they had unpaid time they put in for that.
So George Miller is suing Warner Brothers for a $7 million bonus in terms of financial payouts for performance incentives for Mad Max Fury Road.
So performance incentives as well.
Or things like that.
Yeah.
So he said the studio was contracted to pay him a $7 million bonus if the sequel came in at a final cost of less than $157 million. And he said, but Warner Brothers is claiming the film went over budget based on decisions that he made. And so they're going back and forth on it.
For some reason, the article I read talked about some, pay for work. He didn't get paid for some of the work he actually did. It wasn't anything with those bonuses.
Well, it's probably multi-layered contractual language that we drug out. But I think that hopefully that series, so Fury Road, kind of like these Halloween movies maybe, is just like, well, there's a character named Mad Max, and that's kind of really all that's connecting this film to these other films, aside from the fact like his family died. And that's kind of like the only connective tissue. So, I would like to see another movie in that universe, but at the same time,
if he's owed those wages and that's the agreement, that people seem to be on the same page for. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and
hope he sticks his ground.
Hopefully they get that worked out and then he can get something out, because I would like to see that universe revisited and Fury Road proved without a shadow of a doubt that George Miller still has it.
I wonder who owns the rights to Mad Max? Does he kind of retain those rights or something? Could he potentially take those to another studio?
I'm not sure. They usually sound like multi-picture deals and things like that to lock it in for a significant portion of time. But so George Miller is another auteur director that one of the few examples, there's not a lot of directors that are huge, because a lot of times you see people that kind of have huge careers throughout a portion of their career, and then they peak and then they fall. And then with George Miller, he did some of those animated films, the Happy Feet, I think.
And then he did Babe,
and whatever. So you had those kind of like family films. You're like, well, I mean, they're making money, so he has only lost the ability
and well
to
reviewed.
He hasn't lost the ability to please audiences. But then he comes back to Fury Road, which is the first thing he had done like that in years, and you're like, well, damn, dude still got it. Give him some money for some more projects. So even if I want to see him make something, just because Fury Road was like a visual spectacle, and I like to see more from him. So
if I would rather see him do another Mad Max or something original, that's fine. But if for some reason he gets locked up and can't do a Mad Max, I would love to see him be able to go hog wild on on a franchise film.
Well,
'Cause that's where he would get the money
he
for
had
it.
been linked to doing like the Justice League Dark, which are
Yeah.
the characters like Constantine and Swamp Thing.
Yeah.
So
And granted, do we need more superhero films? No, we don't.
or maybe he was attached to the actual Justice League, and it was somebody else that was. Regardless,
I
he
thought
was
Del Toro may have been linked to the Dark one. It was somebody.
George Miller was attached to Justice League or some DC properties for some
he was
period of time.
attached to some superhero film. I would be fine with that if we can't get Mad Max for that reason, and he has no other thing, no other
Yeah.
like story in his bones.
Yeah.
It would be cool to see him get a large budget and go hog wild on just a big budget film. And I just say superhero because that's the most bankable thing right now for the most part. Or give him a Star War, that would be.
A Star Wars.
That would fit his, we could do a post-apocalyptic Star Wars film and just set, Mad Max in space.
Yeah.
He just flies in on the Millennium Falcon, that would be awesome because that would be an awesome, offshoot film like the Rogue One or whatever.
Yeah.
It would be very cool to see him do the first R-rated Star Wars film.
Yeah. So we'll have to see if he can actually get anything in motion. Oh, and none of us so far have seen Justice League, so I don't know that I will, just because I didn't dig the. So Wonder Woman I really enjoyed. Like the other movies, like Suicide Squad, I finally caught. And I just didn't care for it at all. Batman v Superman at least looked visually interesting and had some set pieces that were interesting, but as a whole, to me, didn't really hang together very well. And I don't really want to go and spend $30 at the theater to see a movie right now that I'm not sold on.
I've almost made it to see Thor a couple times, and then I also want to see The Killing of a Sacred Deer.
Yeah.
But, every time I'm like on the edge or getting it, it's like, oh, no, actually, I don't have the time. So I had not made it out to see anything since Murder on the Orient Express.
So I guess now I can move into discussing the things we've been watching and discussing like making it to the theater. So a caveat I want to give to everybody if you're considering seeing this movie and you haven't already. So the new Pixar animated film Coco. Really enjoyed it. As usual, it had an engaging story. It was able to, be a tearjerker and, get people in the way that their movies typically do. Great movie. Really enjoyed it. It was about like the Dios de los Muertos, Day of the Dead. So it dived into that kind of mythology and that holiday, and had represented it accurately and respectfully, and two, I hadn't looked up what the voice cast was, and then I listened to it and I was like, oh, thank God they didn't do the thing they did in the 90s where every Hispanic role went to Salma Hayek and Antonio Banderas, because I love them as actors and I love seeing them in things, but there was a period of time where it seemed like they would give any role for a Hispanic actor to one of those two.
Did Cheech Marin also pop up?
Cheech Marin was in it. He had a small part, but like the kid actor,
gotta have Cheech Marin. He's a Mexican national icon.
Yeah, but like beyond that, there were some like recognizable names in there. Like Benjamin Bratt was one of the voices and stuff, but overall, it was just an enjoyable film that, went into something that hasn't been covered a ton in mainstream big budget films and treated with respect. It was a very interesting story. Visually, it looked amazing. All that. So I really recommend it, giving it a score out of 10. Like, it's at least an 8.5. Like, I haven't, a lot like the recent Pixar movies, like the sequel stuff and Cars and all, I didn't want to see those. But this one, I was like, oh, it's an original story. It's not a franchise. And it's about something that you don't see too often about Day of the Dead.
Mm-hmm.
And I just really enjoyed it. The visuals were interesting and, had a lot of skulls and stuff in it. Could be scary.
So it's horror,
Yeah,
a lot of
it's horror. It could be I'd be interested to see if any kids were scared by it, because there were like skeletons and stuff in it. But like watching that made me want to go play that game again, Grim Fandango.
Oh yeah.
But really recommend that movie if you enjoy it. But what I would also recommend is getting to the theater like 30 minutes late, because before this movie, so Pixar usually has like their shorts that are like 5-10 minutes at the most that are really enjoyable and sometimes better than the film they run in front of. Mm-hmm. So I just knew that this movie came out. I saw that it had a high rating. I was like, well, I want to see that. And Julie wanted to see it. So we saw it. I did not do enough research to know that there was a 21-minute Olaf's Frozen Adventure short, quote unquote short film that ran before it. And it's like saccharine sweet. And I think it was originally supposed to be a TV special or part of a TV special block that they then, I guess, decided like, well, we got this movie, let's throw it in front of that because we can sell more Frozen dolls.
Yeah.
But they did that. So not only do you have the usual 15 minutes of trailers, but then you, on top of that, then you have a 21-minute short film that to me was unbearably bad. And maybe 6-year-olds enjoy it. Maybe they do. I'm not 6, and I hated it.
William Caps, I'm not 6.
I'm not 6 years old. I'm at least, more than 4 times that. But the overall effect of that short film was just, I was angry watching it because it's like, I didn't know exactly how long it was. Like, well, should I take a bathroom break now, or like, is it going to end in the next minute? And then it just kept going on and on and on. And the songs are bad. And it just put into stark contrast, like how much better Pixar is at the films and whatever that thing was. So if you have kids that want to see that movie, I'd recommend looking at the start time. You can get there 30 minutes late and you're fine.
Just get reserved seats. Make sure you got some good seats.
Yeah, if you get reserved seats and show up, 30 minutes late, you're fine. I read in Mexico, so many people complained they actually pulled the trailer or pulled that short film from the reels and stopped showing it with it. And good on them. I wish that I had that option because that was a waste of my time I'll never get back. Saying that, having watched some terrible movies, that was just wasted time, and I wish I'd known that going into it. But yeah, that... then I also watched, Sean, you'd watch the first episode of The Punisher on Netflix. I've watched the first 7 episodes of The Punisher on Netflix.
How are you feeling about it?
And
how many are there? They're like 12 or 10?
I think it's 13.
I thought there was like a decent amount of episodes.
All the Marvel series, if they were just like 6 or 8 episodes, they'd be golden. But I think they have too little story for 13 episodes in every case, even if there's some good elements.
Well, also, too, as people said, Netflix, their competitors sleep and they want to have you watching Netflix as much as possible. So, so the theory is that they pad out some of their shows.
So far, the things I'll say about the series are that I think it's a good background show. So if it's a show that you want to watch but not be super engaged in it the entire time you're watching it, that's not, I guess that's kind of really faint praise. There's a lot of stuff like that in this era that there's so much content, you can throw it on, you'll catch some like cool action scenes here and there, but then you don't really have to care too much. And I know some people have really been into it and thought it was like the best representation on the screen. And like, it's interesting. It's definitely completely disconnected from the rest of the Marvel universe because it's mostly about soldiers from Iraq and PTSD. And they just feel so weird juxtaposing that against people that have PTSD from the alien attacks and the Avengers and stuff. Like, it seems like in the real world, if other universes and alien creatures and superheroes and the Hulk and all these things were commonplace, it seems like it would be like a paradigm shift, and a lot of stuff that would go on would cease to be important and or something that would have as much of an impact on everybody.
Yeah, I get that, yeah.
Not downplaying like the effect of PTSD. Like, I think regardless of any of that stuff happening, there would still be, soldiers would still experience what soldiers experience. I'm just saying in the general world, I think that New York would not be essentially unchanged. I don't think that there would still be like the drug dealers and stuff. Like, it just seems like a lot of stuff, the paradigm would shift once all this stuff became known. And some things like Spider-Man Homecoming kind of touched on that, or just a very tiny amount. And it just feels like this is a show disconnected from the rest of that universe, aside from like one character so far from those other shows showing up. But aside from that, like, it's a decent enough series on its own. It just doesn't really mesh with the rest of the Marvel universe. To me, that's fine, because the Punisher, when he's paired up against Spider-Man and some of these other characters, it's not the kind of more hard R-rated type character that it really is. So I'm fine with it. Like, it's not a show that I'm in love with, or I would say if the Netflix stuff so far hasn't, if you hated Daredevil and you hate those other series, I don't think this one's going to turn you around on it. But if you already watched those, it's definitely better than Iron Fist. And it is interesting, though. It seemed like initially everybody thought that the Marvel series were amazing, and now it's kind of changed in the other direction. Like, well, maybe these weren't as good as we thought, with like the Iron Fist and Defenders.
I've
But-
only watched, out of all the Marvel series, I've watched one episode of The Punisher. That's it. I thought
Yeah.
it was okay. You know, I talked about it last time. I thought
Yeah.
it was all right. Like I'll keep watching it, but like I started another series
Yeah.
and have not watched anymore.
Yeah, I'm interested to see where it goes and see how it all plays out. But it's stories that seemingly have relatively low stakes of just like people involved with like criminal elements, versus some of the larger stakes you've seen brought about in other shows. But I don't know. At this point, I prefer that to glowy thingy in the sky that's going to destroy the city or blow up something. I prefer smaller stakes that have more personal stakes for the characters involved or things like that. So still have a number of episodes to go. So, I've enjoyed it. I'm not in love with it. And if the character's name wasn't the Punisher, I don't know that I'd be watching it. If it was just, the same show, just without any attached baggage. Like John Bernthal, the guy that plays the Punisher, and I think he's doing a good job as a character. It is still interesting watching that because I still think of him as Shane from The Walking Dead. But he's been in a bunch of other stuff like Wolf of Wall Street and other shows. So he's a good actor. It's just like in some things he gets used in like the kind of brooding, badass role. But yeah, so it's a show that
Was he actually in The Purge, or was that somebody else?
no,
Purge
that's
Anarchy?
Frank Grillo.
Frank Grillo. Okay. I need to look up who Frank Grillo is because it's been a long time since I saw that.
He
when it
was. So did you see Captain America: Civil War?
Yeah.
And Captain America: The Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
So he was the guy that was Crossbones or whatever, like the opening villain in Captain America.
Okay.
And he was like the leader of the Special Forces group.
Got it. Yeah.
And he's been in a bunch of other stuff. So Frank Grillo and John Bernthal could probably go for some of the same roles. I would assume
He had a Punisher type character though.
Yes, in The
that's what I was
Purge.
thinking. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, so you could see him playing that role too. But yeah, so far The Punisher is a show that if you're not into those shows already, it's not necessarily like an automatic recommend. But it's more of like a small scale military show that has a character in it that just happens to have been involved in more comic booky elements in other series in the Daredevil season 2 stuff. But like I'm enjoying it. I'm not in love with it, but I don't, definitely watching that as a relief after Slasher season 2. But, I think that was really all the stuff I had a chance to watch this week because it had Thanksgiving. Had Thanksgiving going on and family to visit and all kinds of places to go.
I watched a couple of Thanksgiving movies, the traditional, Nicole never seen Dutch. Have you watched Dutch before?
No.
That's a lesser, John Hughes, he wrote that film. I don't think he directed that one. People don't talk about that one as much. So I didn't see that until I was a little bit older. But because I always thought, okay, this is not, oh, there goes your phone. This is not like, top tier John Hughes. People don't really talk about it a lot. It's just, I thought maybe it really wasn't worth my time.
Yeah.
It's actually, I like that movie. I think it's pretty good. Ed O'Neill, Married with Children.
Yeah.
He is in the lead role. And the son is, oh my gosh, I'm trying to think. And now I'm blanking on who the son is. But essentially, he is like the boyfriend of this prep school kid who's like our brat. And he's supposed to be picking him up to take him home on Thanksgiving to Ed O'Neill's girlfriend's house.
Yeah. Oh, so it's Ethan Embry.
Yeah, Ethan Embry, who was in like Devil's Candy.
Yeah.
What else is he in? He's a million things.
Can't Hardly Wait.
Yeah, can't hardly well click on his name. There was like some more recent stuff too that was.
He was in The Guest in a small role. I think he had like a small role on one of the seasons of The Walking Dead. He's
had some more iconic roles, and I can't think of them right now. But anyway,
he was in Cheap Thrills. Which
he's a very young
kid.
kid. I like that movie. It's a road trip movie, kind of set on like pre-Thanksgiving. Like he's trying to get to, Dutch is trying to get him to his mother's house by Thanksgiving. And it's good. It's a, John Hughes written film. So it's pretty solid. And I also watched Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, which is another John Hughes film, which I'm sure most people have seen, where it's also a road trip movie, about getting home for Thanksgiving. A better film than Dutch, but still, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. That's a phenomenal film. John Candy and Steve Martin are awesome. But I finally bought that because it was like $5 on Vudu. Because every year I'm like, okay, I'm ready to watch Planes, Trains. Or since I watched it, somewhat recently, and it's always, those films are always hard to find, or they're not on streaming services. And it was
Yeah.
like, I think it was $15 or $18 to buy.
Yeah.
But the day after Thanksgiving, it went down to $5. So
Yeah.
I just bought it then. Let's see. A thing I didn't talk about last time was the finale of Vice Principals.
Yeah, I still haven't watched season 2 yet.
The ending of that show is very good. I mean, the last few episodes are really good whenever things kind of come to a head, because it is, it's partially, granted, season 2 is different than season 1 and that kind of what it's about. Season 1 is about them trying to bring down the new principal.
Yeah.
Season 2 is a different thing, but it is nice to see that, like, okay, they made a story, they wanted to end it, and it's basically just 2 seasons and that's it. So it's a very satisfying conclusion. A lot of things come to a head at the end of that series. It's just awesome. I hope they do another original series sometime soon.
I'm gonna get HBO again for a month to watch that season 2 and other stuff.
Yeah.
Because
Highly recommend it. I mean, because season 1 very good. It's does not disappoint.
and it's a show
at all.
too that is a lot of it's about toxic male masculinity and ego and all these like entitlement issues, and it ties in perfectly to the political climate and all the stuff that's going on today unintentionally, because they made it before all the election stuff and a lot of the things got stoked up on social media, and it just is a perfect counterbalance to look like, well, so a lot of this stuff people are doing on social media and in the real world, here's like 2 guys in the show taking it to the extreme, like in a quote unquote like real scenario of like, what would somebody that feels that amount of entitlement do
when they aren't automatically getting the position
when
they think
feel
they're owed.
when they feel slighted and they feel entitled. What length would they go to get what they wanted?
Yeah.
And that show just tackles that in a way that
And season 2 is different because I'm not spoiling anything. Season 2 is different. It's about a different thing, kind of, and the characters have changed by that point. So it's cool that it's a series where the characters actually change.
Yeah.
And although people change when they go through things, a lot of times they're at core still kind of the same person on certain levels, So they are still very flawed characters. I would not mind rewatching that series again from the beginning right now.
Yeah.
Very good. Highly recommend it. I finally watched Anomalisa.
Anomalisa.
Yeah. Charlie Kaufman film. I'd been meaning to see that since it came out. I want to go to the theater to see it. Just never did. It's on like Hulu, I think. So, he wrote Being John Malkovich. What is the other... what is the Jim Carrey? Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Yeah.
Adaptation. Synecdoche, New York.
Yeah. Adaptation's an amazing movie with Nicolas Cage.
Phenomenal. Synecdoche is pretty good too. Charlie Kaufman directed. That was his first film he directed. That's with Philip Seymour Hoffman. This film I didn't like as much as Synecdoche, New York, or just Synecdoche, but I still liked it quite a bit. It's a puppet film,
Yeah.
And I guess there's a reason for that. And all the characters are voiced by 3 people. Jennifer Jason Leigh does one of the female voices, and then then the lead character has a voice, and then all other voices are about one other actor, which is pretty funny. I liked it overall. Like I didn't come away overwhelmed by it being like the most amazing thing ever, like I am when I see a Charlie Kaufman film. Like I said, I love almost all the films he's written. But still, it's worth a watch if you're a fan of his, for sure. And if you are a fan of his, you've probably already seen it. But it is on Hulu to watch now. I finally watched Free Fire as well, Ben Wheatley.
Yeah.
Have you watched any of Ben Wheatley's films? He did, Kill List, High Rise. He's done a few other ones too.
No, I have not watched yet.
So he's a director. Ever since watching Kill List, a lot of people really praise that film, and I did like it quite a bit.
Yeah.
I've never been none of his films have ever been on my top list of the year. But at the same time, for some reason, something about him, he's a filmmaker I want to keep following. I always like the stuff he does.
Yeah.
I don't always love it, but even most filmmakers, if I don't love it, then I'll just be like, okay, they're fine. I don't really care. I don't know why. For some reason, I've really enjoyed following his career, or at least some of the films he's made since the past 3 films that he's made, and I will continue to follow his career. This film, again, I thought maybe this would be kind of the one with the most, I guess, mass appeal, less alienating than some of his other films.
Yeah, it's about like kind of just a shoot 'em up movie in a warehouse.
Yeah, great cast. Brie Larson is one of the leads, and Armie Hammer. He's really good in it. Actually, he's really funny.
Yeah.
It's a funny film, but it is actually kind of what I was afraid it was going to be, where it kind of devolves into a shootout, and then it's just people getting shot at, and there is dialogue and there's things happening, and you've got to pay attention to see like who's getting shot, because it is obviously if somebody gets shot, that changes the tide. Like, you know, every few moments somebody's getting shot in the leg or the arm. So like, okay, this is their condition now. They're almost about to bleed out. This person got shot in the head. Are they actually dead? You know, so, but at the same time, you don't care that much. It is, I think the first half of it's really entertaining because how things kind of devolve and turn into this firefight when it's like this pretty normal guns deal. Yeah. And the reason why it happens, that's all really entertaining. But it loses some steam, and it's a cool idea. I just don't think it really pays off as well as maybe they were hoping. My wife was pretty bored of it pretty quick. I thought she may be, but it's fine. I don't like it as much as Kill List or maybe even High Rise. But again, like High Rise, I think was also a flawed film, but better than Free Fire. Yeah. And Kill List is very cool. I recommend watching Kill List for sure. Yeah. Just to kind of just to kind of get a feel for him as a director. That's a good film to watch. A good solid film. And then real quick, Big Sick. Have you watched that yet? Yes. Yeah, that's on Amazon Prime. I had to watch it in two different settings, so it kind of maybe lost some of the emotional impact because when things were coming to a head, I had to stop. Yeah. But I enjoyed that quite a bit. It's not as funny as I thought it was going to be, or maybe hoped it was going to be. Yeah. It's it's a comedy drama, but the comedy isn't overwhelming. It's not it's not a flat out comedy film. Yeah, I mean, like, and I like because it's about Camille Nanjiani. About him and his wife met. True story. And I'm sure like some stuff has been updated or played up a little bit just for the movie, but like I'd already heard like them discuss their story on podcasts before. So like I knew the story, but I still really enjoyed it. Yeah. And like Ray Romano was great in it, and like Helen Hunt was good in it. Holly Hunter. Yeah. Holly Hunter, yes. Yeah. Helen Hunt. Sorry, I didn't mean to confuse. Yeah, Holly actresses. Hunter is great. I didn't know she was in it. I knew Ray Romano was, and I'd love to see her pop up. I think all the stuff. I thought the film was great. I thought, but I was hoping to laugh a lot more than I did, and not that it was. That it was not funny. It just wasn't trying to be that type of film. Yeah, like there's comedy in it, but it wasn't the point. Yes, so it wasn't a major laugh out loud comedy. Is more of like a drama with comedic elements and things like that. So. And it was very good, and I kind of knew the story too. Yeah. So like that stuff wasn't a surprise, and even having known the story, it was still definitely worth a watch. But yeah, that was a very good drama from this year. I thought it was maybe going to be based on the reviews, like, oh, this is maybe like one of the better films of the year. I'm not saying it's bad, but as far as like that type of film, I like the new Noah Baumbach film. The one that's got Dustin Hoffman in it. Stories of Dustin Hoffman. Which is unfortunate timing. I know, it's like I was hoping that happens with Adam Sandler anytime soon. I gotta look that up because that is on Netflix to watch for free if you have Netflix, obviously. Was it the Meyerowitz story? Yes, I thought that was hilarious. Like my wife and I laughed through that entire film. Thought it was very good. It's a family drama as well. Obviously, that one's all fictional, but the characters feels like a lot of that comes from real stories and real people. I think that is one of Noah Baumbach's best films in a while. Yeah. And then the last thing was Godless, that Netflix series, the Western. Yeah. I guess Scott Frank, I think he may have directed all the episodes. I guess it's a project he'd been working on for a long time. He wrote The Wolverine and one other film, and then he worked on, somebody said he added the Western elements, quote unquote, to Logan. Oh, okay. But it is a straightforward Western. People keep saying, oh, it turns it on its head because there's a town full of women. I don't feel like it turns the Western on its head that much. Like it has a lot of the archetypical characters. Like, there's a character who doesn't shoot anymore.
Yeah.
He's like, a really good gunslinger, but he doesn't shoot anymore. He's done shooting guns, which is a trope used tons. And his last name is his name's Roy Good. His last name is literally Good, and he's like kind of a good guy. It's a genre film. It's a genre show, a Western. It's like, as somebody said, a Western with a capital W, and it doesn't do anything that kind of subverts the genre or anything like that. There's a town full of women, but it's not the point of it. And I know some people have complained well, is it really doing what it should be doing, or maybe the way it was promoted? And I'm not really sure how it's promoted because I didn't watch the trailers or anything like that. So it's a lot of stories, and it really does feel almost like a novel where it's all these characters, and they all have their own stories. And the women in the town, that is a story, but it's not it's not a thematic point the film is trying to, or the show is trying to make, I think, with those characters. So I don't think it is building itself up to be this touchstone of, a feminist's story or anything like that. It just happens to have a town, and obviously, they wrote it this way, but I don't think it is trying to put that on its own shoulders as a responsibility. I think it's just a story they wrote, and these women that kind of run this town are just one part of the story, and it's kind of centers around that, obviously. But I thoroughly enjoyed that, even though it's straightforward. It does some things you expect. Jeff Daniels is stellar in it. I thought he is he is the villain in it, but he is not a one note character. I think his character is phenomenal. His acting is incredible as always. Really good cast. Granted, not all the acting is stellar though. Some of the acting is a little suspect on some of the characters, but overall, it's probably my favorite Netflix series.
Yeah.
Just as far as I binge watch that, and I don't do that to Netflix series.
Yeah.
I end up burning through all that. And the episodes too, they're meaty. I think they're between an hour and 10 minutes to an hour and 30 minutes, or they're essentially movies. Each episode is almost a little bit shorter than an average movie. But I think there's 7 episodes. I thoroughly enjoyed that. Highly recommend at least watching the first episode to see if you're in on that.
Yeah.
So I just want to give that major praise.
Yeah. So it sounds like I'll need to check that out once I get a chance. So I guess we can move in now to our review of Better Watch Out. And I said we'll start without spoilers, because I think that if we spoil, this is a movie I think you should go in knowing as little about it as possible. And so I guess what we'll do is we'll just go through what our general thoughts are with no spoilers and what our recommendation is, and maybe give a score, and then go into the spoilers, because that'll be most of the discussion with this movie, because this is one where if you haven't heard of it before, I wouldn't watch the trailer, because I haven't seen the trailer. I should probably go back now and watch it after I've seen the movie. I just know that this is a movie. So, if you just want to know the bare bones concept, there is a young boy who is 12 years old. He'll be 13 sometime soon.
Yeah.
And his babysitter is a little bit older teenager. I think they said 5 years older, so she's 17. So he wants to, one night when his parents are out and she's watching him, trying to convince her to give him a chance. So kind of a setup. This probably happened a lot before, the younger guy that wants the cool high school girl to be into him, and then something happens when the parents aren't there. And that's really all the setup you need to know about the movie. And watching this movie, immediately I was like, oh, so it reunited the leads from M. Night Shyamalan's The Visit of Olivia DeJonge. I'm not sure how you pronounce her name. And then Ed Oxenbould.
I didn't even realize that until I went on IMDb and was checking out the cast. I was like, oh my gosh, it has both of them in there.
Well, because I was like, because I realized the guy who's in this movie, he plays Garrett. I realized he was the young boy from The Visit immediately. Mm-hmm. And then Olivia DeJonge, who plays Ashley, took me a second to realize it was her, because there is a little bit of difference going from 11 to 13. That's a little bit different than going from 15 to 19 or 18 or however old she was when this movie got made. But and then Patrick Warburton is in it, he's the dad. And then from Stranger Things season 2, there's a character that shows up at some point. So Virginia Madsen's in it. So it has a good cast. And this is something that got a lot of festival buzz. And I think a lot of times with horror movies, what happens, horror movies, thriller movies, genre movies, especially genre bending movies, I think a lot of times you get a little bit of an echo chamber from festivals where you have, critics and genre directors and actors and fans who are there who are open to movies that combine and mishmash elements from different genres. And, like we're into that. If you've watched our stuff or hear us talk about things like genre bending movies or things that have unexpected twists or that aren't just standard narratives, do really well in festival settings because people are open to that and are fans of everything. So they're open.
And they're tired of watching the same stuff over and over when it's predictable.
They don't want to see some mainstream knockoff of The Strangers.
Yeah, a film they've seen 100 times before, essentially.
So everybody's open to movies that try something different. And so this movie got a lot of buzz on the festival circuit. And it was, I think, so right now it's called Better Watch Out. It was previously called Safe Neighborhood, but they changed the name because they thought the name was bad. And so it's a movie that,
it fits better with a Christmas setting,
Yeah, and I'd seen it talked about a lot, and I had heard to not watch the trailers, and like all the synopsis out of the festivals are more like, oh, it's like a holiday set movie that may go some places you don't expect. Don't read anything else about it. Just check it out when it's available. And that was all I knew. And you didn't watch the trailer either, right?
No, I didn't even know you weren't supposed to watch a trailer. Like I knew nothing about it.
Yeah.
And it's a shame though, because it's like, it's hard to get a lot of press
It's hard to
about it.
sell something.
It's hard to sell it. And it's unfortunate because this was in theaters,
Yeah, like limited
year.
theatrical run. It didn't make much money in theater.
Yeah.
It's going to live most of its life on VOD and Blu-ray and DVD and probably a streaming service whenever it hits one.
And something like Krampus where it's, pretty straightforward. There's a creature, you can sell that to people
Krampus,
easily. That's
even
an easy
if Krampus
sell.
had some elements at the end that you're like, what exactly all this mean? Like, because there were some, questions of the narrative, but they sold it on trailers that showed creatures and that showed, Adam Scott and David Koechner and, Tony Collette. So people you had seen in other things.
You can see like 80% of the trailer, 80% of the film in the trailer, and it's not really that big of a problem. You know what I mean? It doesn't really spoil it.
You know that
It makes
Krampus
you more
shows up.
excited.
But you don't know how it's going to end up. So this movie, I haven't seen the trailer.
I haven't either.
And I just think that if you haven't heard of it before and you want to watch something that is a movie set at Christmas that isn't ghost or creatures or things like that, this is a movie to check out. And like I said, there's good performances and good actors.
Yeah, I don't know really any other Christmas horror films this year that are released that have a standard level of production value. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like just based on that alone, like even if it's just you want to see a brand new horror film set on Christmas that has good production value that isn't just,
because I've seen like
independently produced.
I remember some independent movies I've seen stuff shared about like Good Tidings is one that's like a Christmas set horror film. Haven't had a chance to see it yet, but like it's a lower budget indie project as opposed to this is like recognizable faces and all that stuff. So if you're looking,
and I think great acting.
Yeah, and like
I think great acting. Normally, younger kid actors.
It's very hit or miss.
And it's not only the kids, too. It's the writing on the kids. You know what I mean? Or the characterization of them. Sometimes that also is hit or miss. I think that all stuff was great for me.
Like, just thinking about this, so, like, the leads in this movie are, just in terms of the main characters, you have a 12-year-old boy and a 17-year-old girl. And another movie that comes to mind with a not all that dissimilar setup in terms of a 12-year-old, like a younger boy, teenage-esque girl, or teenage age girl, and the parents are gone and something happens is The Babysitter, which is on Netflix. So The Babysitter to me seems like the movie that if you just want the straightforward narrative and you just want the thing that delivers exactly what you think it's supposed to based on the trailer, that movie does that. You may not, I did not connect with it and didn't like what it was representing, but it did deliver what it was supposed to, of a very kind of cliched, straightforward story of a babysitter and then stuff happening. So that movie kind of did a mainstream, more palatable, I think, story, as opposed to this one. I mean, it's not like an art film. It's not David Lynch.
And that's the cool thing about it too. It is, I would think that most audiences would be receptive to this because
Yes.
it doesn't try to do anything too weird, too alienating.
Yeah.
And in my eyes, and it's, you know, it is a genre film, and it's has fun with the genre, and it is a horror film, and you know, it seems like it would be right up horror fans' alley, you know, that have seen a lot of horror films that want to
Yeah.
see something kind of cool and interesting.
You know, like if you live on a street and your street's name is horror movies, it'd be right up that alley. And like just looking for something that's, you know, set during Christmas, that's not, like I said, it's not a knockoff slasher, that's not, you know, there's nobody running around in a Santa costume stabbing people. There's no, you know, this doesn't have Krampus in it. So like it doesn't have those elements. So if you're looking, I'm just trying
It's a film worth making because it is not all filled with typical Christmas cliches or even like, you know, a lot of horror film cliches repackaged into something you've already seen before. Like it is something fresh. It is something, you know, set during Christmas. So now's the time to watch it.
So, and it's one of those movies, like I said, though, I think that it works best, like, if you're going to a film festival and you just see the one line, like, description, like, young boys home alone with the babysitter. And
I would like to see this in theaters with people,
Like,
with a big crowd. I think that would
like-
be a lot of fun.
yeah, so I think that'd be fun, especially if people not knowing where the twists and turns are going.
Yeah.
And then I also think it works well for streaming services. Like, I think this could do really well on Netflix or something where somebody doesn't have the mindset of, oh, I went to the theater and paid X amount of dollars expecting this. If you're just kind of like, oh, this, you know, this sounds interesting, it's got good reviews, I'll check it out. I think that mindset makes people more open to experiencing a story, because with horror movies or movies that are purported to be horror or genre films, so Mother, Darren Aronofsky's Mother, people who watched the trailers may have thought it was a thriller film that had some horror elements in it, or a horror film, or, you know, going into it, I didn't really watch the full trailer. I only saw the teaser that just didn't even really show any footage. And I didn't really know what to expect. So I went in, I was kind of open to what it was. And then I was okay with what it was and parsed it out and watched it and enjoyed it for what it was. But if somebody went in because they thought it was going to be, you know, Ed Harris and Michelle Pfeiffer doing some crazy ass, you know, home invasion stuff, and you have Jennifer Lawrence and all, like, if you expected that, you were probably going to hate it, because you went in expecting, like, to give a food analogy, you went in, you're hungry for a burger, and somebody gave you, like, a pretzel and beer cheese. And you're like, well, that wasn't what I wanted at all. And regardless of the quality of it, it's not what I wanted.
Well, it's like, you know, if you take a sip of a drink and you think it's sweet tea and it's a Coke,
yeah.
and you're like, ugh, but normally you'd be fine with a Coke.
Or like what happened to me one time when I was younger, we were at a restaurant and I went to take a drink of what I thought was my soft drink, and it was milk, because the person...
That's good.
So it's like...
You know what I did when I was younger? My parents smoked in the house, and we always had Pepsi around, which I'm sick of Pepsi now because I drank it like it was water when I was a kid. They would like to dip their ashes in the cans.
Oh, no.
So one day I was sitting there and I grabbed the can off the side of the can and took a giant drink, just gulped it down, and it was so much ashes and old Pepsi.
That sounds like the
I
worst.
could still taste that.
So I feel sorry that you have that memory. Like, yeah, but yeah, like, so I think a lot of times, like, those analogies, like, you know, you're expecting to get, or even though, like, to go in the other direction, you're expecting to get a glass of milk when you're eating some cake, and instead it's Big Red.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh,
Yeah.
that's not what I expected. So I just think that a lot of times movies can do that to people, and like,
And it'll turn them off. Yeah.
and stuff like Cabin in the Woods was a movie where I've mentioned that a number of times, because I came out of it, and everybody who was wearing like Evil Dead shirts, or like I said, stuff that indicated they knew who the people behind it were, they were in on it and they enjoyed it. They were having fun with it. But everybody who went in because they literally wanted a movie where teenage kids went to a cabin in the woods and died in a cliched way, they then came out upset because they got something that broke their expectation and delivered something they didn't want. So I think a lot of times with movies, you run that risk. And looking at the reviews on IMDb and some of the user reviews for Better Watch Out, there was a number of 1-star reviews where people were like physically angry over what the movie delivered. And my thought on that was, like I said, I haven't seen the trailer. So if you watch the trailer and you really expect one specific thing from the movie, and it does a sharp 90-degree turn, then a 180-degree turn from what you thought, I can understand somebody being like, well, wait a minute. But at the same time, like, do you get so caught up on your preconceived notion of what a movie's supposed to be that you then don't even want to watch it or enjoy it? Because the critical reviews for it are really good.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I know some people like to bash the critics, but it has a 91% on Rotten Tomatoes. And there's a lot of indie horror, or I guess independent horror films.
Well,
I don't know. What is this considered? There's a lot of films like this that are reviewed really well that even sometimes we don't even like.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? That we're like, I don't think it deserves that.
So
score.
basically, you're under $10 million budgeted horror or genre film that have
release films.
They have recognizable cast in them that are critically lauded and festival darlings. A lot of times disappoint because they get built up in this echo chamber of people seeing them, and you watch it, you're like, oh, I expected this and I got that. So I mean that's happened with us a number of times where these movies that get kind of hyped up, we see them and they're just kind of like, that really wasn't satisfying. Like to me, like Raw was kind of that. It was a big festival movie that I heard everybody talk about, and then I finally saw it, and it's like, well, it really didn't live up to my expectations based on the hype for it.
Yeah, I did like that one. So that'll be a good conversation for end of the year. If Derek will watch it, Derek probably won't like it though either.
But I mean, just the point being, so Better Watch Out is one of those movies where, like I said, and it's not like an art house film.
No.
So it's more of just, the basic outline of what I said. It's like a 12-year-old boy and a 17-year-old babysitter home alone when the parents leave. And then beyond that, that's all you really need to know. Like, I enjoy it. Like I said, it just, and in some points even veered into horror comedy, really, just because it was like so over the top. And it was just one of those things where I think expectation is a lot of whether or not people like it. So like some of the reviews I saw, they're like the super negative reviews, but it happens on everything on IMDb. Somebody gives it a 1 out of 10. I just always like to kind of get the counterpoint to what other people's opinions are to kind of say, well, where's mine relative to others? Yeah. And like I said, a lot of this is just us skirting around spoilers. So
what would you give it?
So if I had to give this a score out of 10, it's kind of tough because like there's like a certain amount of score I would give it for what it did, like how it started and how it ended. Like there's a certain amount of like, oh, it's really cool you got from here to here. And, and then there's the element of like, well, the movie is well acted. It had, interesting cast in it. There were a few issues I had with some of the way things played out. But, I enjoyed it, and I would recommend somebody who wants to check this out to check it out, just recognizing that, don't watch a trailer, just watch it and go along for the ride and see where you end up. Like, I don't know, giving it a score out of 10 is kind of tough because I think,
I also don't want to oversell this film to people because, it is,
to me, it's not like my top 5 right now, but
it's not I think Get Out was really well executed on many levels. It is not kind of that. It's almost weird to call it expertise on his first film, but he was expertly directed that film and handled everything about it. I think it is not on that level of execution. But at the same time, there were a lot of things he had to balance and kind of get right to make sure you were along for the ride on some turns. And I think he did that wonderfully. And it's not like a top tier, instant classic, but at the same time for me, like I was really excited watching the film. I was laughing because of some of the situations, it was dark in certain ways. I loved it. Like If the concept and execution weren't as good as they were, I would, if they were a little mishandled, I would probably knock it down to like a 7, but still enjoy it. So like, just because if it was a lesser film, I would still give it a 7. Like I almost would give this a 9, like, and I'm not even saying it's, one of my favorite of all time, but it's probably one of my favorite surprises in recent years. I will say that.
Yeah. Like
just for that alone, that's why I give it a 9.
Like I'm still positive on it. Like, I think it's like above a 7. Like I would say, it's between like a 7 and 8, it's like a 7.5, just to kind of split the difference. So I enjoyed it and I'd recommend it. It's just one of those things where I could see in my head, like, so me, you're pretty high on it, giving it a 9, I'm giving it 7.5. I could see somebody where some of the things it doesn't rub them the right way and they give it a 2.
Yeah. And
it's unfortunate that a lot of times movies work out that way. Like, it comes at night, a lot of different things. Mother, a lot of movies, and like I said, this is much more, in my opinion, far more straightforward than those movies.
Yeah,
It's a very straightforward movie.
I think that's the achievement here, is that it's a straightforward film for the most part. It has surprises, which any good film should be. It should not follow like a traditional path and just be, unsurprising on every level, and then just have a basic execution. If it's going to be unsurprising, it better have like a phenomenal execution. But this has a good execution and an unconventional path.
Because
that combination and a well executed, I think it makes it like, everything put together makes it achieve a certain score, where separately everything's not like, you know what I mean, at that certain level.
I'm trying to think of comparable movies in terms like You're Next, I think is somewhat comparable.
And personally, like I like it better. Like I think it is that in that same vein of You're Next or The Guest a little bit. Like for me, like I like it better than them.
Yeah.
For it just appeals to me more. I think it's darker in a certain way that I really got enjoyment out of. Like that's the part that really tickled me, is some of the characters in there.
Yeah.
Like I was like, oh, this is like what I want out of horror films a lot of times, is that I don't get, because I get the same characters or the same scenes over and over.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I'm getting a lot of the things that you typically see in horror films, but it just has another spin on it that makes it great, I think. And fresh again almost.
So basically we're giving it a recommend.
Yeah.
And check it out. So I think like we're going to move into spoilers now, because there's so much you got to do spoilers, and you really don't want to know this stuff if you haven't seen the movie yet.
Yeah.
And you plan to watch it.
And it's really not gonna, like, if you're not sold on it, don't listen to spoilers. Wait till it gets on Netflix for free to watch or something, because it probably will be eventually, or Amazon Prime.
Yeah, because you can rent it for not too much.
Even if it's next year, just wait. But I would recommend watching it soon so it doesn't get spoiled. But I mean, I don't see a lot of people talking about this film really.
Yeah.
I have not seen it, considering it's been on VOD for a little while, because I bought it, a few weeks ago and it was on sale. So it has been out and nobody is really talking much about it.
It's one of those movies where I think what will happen is when it finally hits a streaming service, it'll blow up.
Yeah. And it'll get spoiled.
Yeah. So check it out now while you have a chance. So yeah.
Maybe it's a good thing it's not on streaming services right away, just for the surprise of the film. You got to pay, you got to pay some money. But me personally, I'm glad I paid the money to get this film.
Yep, so you can check it out now. So now we'll move into spoilers. Like I said, if you haven't seen the movie, now's the time to bow out, because you don't want to know how it gets spoiled.
This is like opening your presents for Christmas. It's worse than that, actually.
So now we're in spoilers, and the thing that I had heard people make comments about before I saw this, like the only thing I even heard is like I heard some like vague references to Home Alone. And basically the movie's like, what if there was Home Alone, but Kevin McAllister was an evil little bastard who was living out like his sexual assault rape fantasy and like essentially playing the friend-zoned good guy role of like, all the guys you date, telling a woman like, all the guys you date are assholes, I'm better than them, so why don't you date me?
Again, entitled little rich kid.
A little entitled kid who thinks he's owed the affection of this woman.
Yeah.
And basically with his friend sets up a scenario to make her think a home invasion has happened.
Well, that's what I loved about it. It starts off like, okay, is this going to be just a home invasion thing? And I thought, that's fine. There's not a ton of those set at Christmas. Like, let's just watch it.
Well, you thought that it was going to be like, I heard like trailers and people talking about it said they thought it was like Home Alone meets The Strangers. Mm-hmm. And if you thought that, and some of the early setup stuff kind of indicated that maybe you go in that direction of like, enterprising, creative young kid, and smart, 17-year-old girl, flip the tables on home invaders. But then you think about it for a second.
That would just be a slapstick comedy almost.
It'd be a comedy, and the fact that they're just in a house that's not a super huge house, and they don't look to be super, super wealthy. They're just like upper middle class. Like the fact that somebody would go through all the trouble of like, cutting off their phone line and doing all these things seems a bit too much in a residential neighborhood. But then like once you kind of realize what's going on, it's like, oh, well, the neighbors on both sides are gone. So they just set up the scenario that makes it look like this is what's happening. And you're like, well, that's...
I almost got a hint of that, though. I almost got a hint of that he was setting it up before it was revealed.
Well...
And I was like, oh, this is cool if this is the direction. I was like, I hope it's just not that, though. And then that's the end of the film. Like, that's the culmination of it.
Yeah.
Because then I'd be like, but but like really it does a good job as far as pacing because it gets out of the way pretty quickly.
Well, and two, it was kind of like so. Two, there's the twist that happens when Luke and I'm forgetting the characters' names now. Luke and Ashley are in the closet, and he has the gun, and then they see like the burglar in the room, and then Ashley realizes that it's one of Luke's masks. So she's like, "Damn it, this is him and his friend." So then she stops it. So that's the big twist, and you're like, "Oh, okay." So my thought, immediately is like, "Oh, okay." So is the twist now that something actually will happen, and this is where things go off the rails, like. It's this big prank that's like a, fake out for the first however much of the movie, and then it takes a hard right turn and something else happens. Like from Dusk Till Dawn when it goes from crime movie to vampire movie. So it was like, oh, okay, so are there actually going to be invaders? Are there going to be some other horror element? Like what's going to happen? And then when Luke slaps her in the face or hits her in the face with a gun and knocks her out, you're like, oh, okay, so this is just like...
Well, I thought maybe, he hit her, but I thought it was a moment of... rage, and then it was gonna be like, oh, there's this body here, or there's something, and now we're gonna have to deal with this body. It's like it keeps you on your toes with the direction it's going until it gets to the point.
It goes from looking like you might have, like a Home Alone meets The Strangers to then being like, oh, it was a fake out. And then you're like, okay, so what is this now? Is this, and then they knock the girl out, and then she wakes up tied up, and then it's him having her tied up, and then inviting over her current boyfriend and the ex-boyfriend to mess with them and to prove his superiority and why he deserves things more. And then you have like, so those elements, and you have like the traps that he set up, and he has like the paint cans. So he reference like,
he says Home Alone.
Early on, they reference like, would the paint cans from Home Alone kill someone? If you were to swing it off a rope and it swung at him in the face, would it kill the person you hit? And in the movie, he does that to her boyfriend Ricky, I believe.
It's just beautiful seeing the yellow blood splat, like yellow and red. Like that was such a good choice of contrast.
Yeah.
So the thing I love too about that change is it's not only a change in the plots and your expectations.
Yeah.
It's a change in the character because suddenly the character is changed and revealed, and it's way more interesting than it just you're going along and you have this character and it's like, oh, this is who I think the character is. And then if it was a home invasion with Home Alone, that would be a good movie. I'm sure, but. This just has so many darker layers where it's like this kid is really dark under the layer, and he seems like a normal kid that you may see out in your own neighborhood.
Well, and two, I think the other thing that it does, and I don't know if it's intentionally or not, is that so the story that in the 80s was the setup for a kooky comedy movie of, the 12-year-old that wants to end up with some scenario where he gets to kiss the pretty girl.
Oh, yeah.
And that's like a very straightforward narrative that was told a lot, straight-faced. This is good. Kind of going from the friend zone or the babysitter zone or whatever to the male lead. So you took that idea and then you showed like, well, here's the constricted asshole real life version of somebody trying to manipulate that outcome to occur. And you're like, oh, so that those prior movies were kind of gross where that was the outcome. And this shows like the machinations of somebody trying to manufacture that and how terrible of a person they have to be to do it.
Yes.
So you're like, oh, so the
or going to extreme lengths of that at least.
Yes. And a lot of times those movies have characters that do those things and they still win. They get the girl, they win the day because it's all in the, what they wanted happened to work out with the scenario that occurred. And this is like, no, you're not right. And doing this makes you a monster.
Yes.
And no, like most people who are quote unquote friend zoned or whatever, or in his case, babysitter zone, there's not going to be a scenario that ever exists that will then make that person then want to be with you sexually and romantically. Because in real life, I don't think that if somebody like came in and robbed a mall, if you were to stop the robbery, that somebody would then want to date you that had no interest in you before. I don't think it really works that way. Yeah. And so many movies made it appear that way. So this movie, and with all the stuff that's going on in Hollywood with like the Weinstein stuff and all these different just, despicable people getting outed, this having been made prior to all that coming out is good timing because it shows like how toxic some of that stuff is And, you know, so many storylines like, oh, it's, you know, just boys being boys. It's like, well, no, this is a, like, and then a favorite thing is like his voice is cracking. So the character of Luke, his voice is cracking. He's like, he's dancing around and his plot is playing out.
He's a sadistic kid too. Like, you know, he takes joy like in hitting the one boyfriend in the face. You
With
know what
the
I mean? And he starts
paint can.
dancing. Like, I love that little scene.
Oh, with the baseball bat.
Yeah, up on the second floor. Like, I think it's so much of it is so dark. And yeah, it's not like, you know, it's not like a bunch of one-liners, but it's the situations and how dark they are.
Yeah.
And how ridiculous also, but like, you know, horrifying. I think that's what like made it so enjoyable as like a quote unquote horror comedy.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's because it's dark. It's not because it's just trying to throw out crappy one-liners, you know?
Yeah. So then, like, seeing those elements of like Luke trying to manipulate the situation to get what he wants initially, and then not really working out. So, like, I do wonder, like, if his plan had worked to perfection, would they have continued on with the rest of the charade? Or
Yeah, I
would
don't
he,
think so. I think
So I think it would have
he had a
been-
contingency plan,
so-
obviously.
So then it just became, you know, not only, well, he wasn't going to get the girl at that point. So then he just wanted to escalate things even higher and just kind of wish fulfillment and make this big scene where.
Well, originally even though he had her tied her up, he still wasn't going to invite the boyfriend. Well, supposedly because he was going to roofie her. Remember?
Yeah.
He was going to do whatever, roofie her, and then so she wouldn't remember anything.
Yeah.
And then I think he may have actually called the boyfriend.
Well, he was the
after a
one.
certain
He was the
point.
one
Yeah.
that texted him,
Yeah.
and invited him over. So you have these elements of like that, and then it just escalates from there.
And really nobody did any, like, you know, it didn't give you these situations and then had characters do things that were just out of convenience. Like she stood her ground and said, no, I'm not going to play your game. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It wasn't just like he made her do it and he got him over there.
Yeah.
Or the friend did like try to back out several times and it
Yeah.
seemed like
Yeah,
it handled
Garrett.
well. You know what I mean? And also what maybe kids would have done under that peer pressure as well.
Yeah.
But like, I think all that was handled well. Like the characters, I think were really well written and acted for being that young
Yes.
in the film, and the weight that was given to them. They weren't just little side characters that were
Yeah.
like, they had to carry this film.
Well,
all
and
these leads did, and they did a phenomenal job.
The only kind of knock I would give the movie is that after a certain point, the character of Ashley spent most of it tied up
Mm-hmm.
and kind of just, you know, either part of it being gagged or other parts just being kind of passive in the situation, trying to get out of it and then like failing. Like I would say that she didn't get enough to do in the back half, and it never really felt like she was going to get away for the most part. For a lot of the movies, like when she got out, I didn't feel like she was going to get to safety based on just where it was in the movie's runtime. But yeah, so like the stuff with like the pencil that goes into the boyfriend Ricky's like face, like that kind of screws up their plan because they have to figure out a way like that gets explained away. But then like I think his plan is that he's going to get the other boyfriend to write the note to then take the fall.
Which is great because, you know, it's almost like a murder mystery, but you get to see it all happening. You know
get
what I
to
mean?
see-
Like, you get to see the construction of the plan.
Because
And
most
it's-
movies, the way it starts is it's already happened.
Yeah.
And then it gets explained to you throughout it. And by the end of it, you knew exactly what the plan was. Or you just see parts of it. You're obscured from it. Like Saw, the first Saw film. You're obscured from what the overall plan was until the last moment or the last minutes of the movie. And you realize Jigsaw was in the room the entire time. Spoiler for Saw from 2004 or whatever. But this movie, you get to see his machinations and all of his plans start kind of play out. And then you see as it goes.
And him being a young kid, you could see him be able to get away with it almost. Or, you know what I mean? If he had brought up enough excuses and
Yeah.
played out the plan, who would suspect this kid really?
This 12-year-old
Yeah.
that has like the little heartbeat machine under his bed and is a mama's
Yeah.
boy and, you know, spoiled. You don't think that he's responsible for the death of, you know, two people and one person he thought was dead that really wasn't. And, well, no, actually, three people for sure dead because he killed his friend too. Because his friend eventually kind of, and it wasn't that his friend was betraying him, it's that the friend like was kissing her. So he was creepy too. In that moment, like when he was talking to Ash about like letting her go because he'd gone too far, then he even was like being weird and trying to kiss her and stuff. And that's what set off Luke's character of like, no, if anybody's gonna do this, me. So and two, the element
The
of
violence was also like hard and fast and brutal.
yes,
You know,
like
and it wasn't drawn out torture porn stuff really.
Yeah, and there wasn't a lot of
It was
gore.
just, it was brutal. and the situation was brutal that a lot of it was in.
Because
Like
the most gore there was a pencil stuck in a face, because the paint can thing, you only saw the aftermath
Yeah.
and not the actual face. The stuff with like the shotgun blast, you just saw like a very quick shot of like blood on a character. And then with the other stuff that happened, like with the guy Jeremy, the boyfriend that was the guy who was mullet bad guy on Stranger Things.
we had to
season
look
2.
him up because it's like, who is that? Who is that? I was like, oh, okay.
He's also the Red Ranger apparently in the new Power Rangers movie.
Huh.
But
I should have kept that mullet. Keep it nice.
But like him getting hung after writing that note, that like an apology that would then like according to what he thought, he had to write this apology note and give it to her, and then she let him in the house, like just to make amends or something. So then you have him get hung, and it's like, oh, so the kid actually is pretty smart, because he had him write the note, and he's gonna pin it all on him. And
it's a good plan. Like it all seems logical. Like
and
it
it
could
all
work
hangs
out. Like,
together.
That's what like keeps the film together too, or it doesn't fall apart at the end.
And then like when you see him like kind of triumphantly getting ready for bed, and
Well, that's the worst part too, is when you almost want him to get away with it, because
Yes.
you followed him along with this plan. You're like,
Yeah.
and he's like on the roof and knocking over decorations, like, oh, don't get caught.
And then
Like,
you see him, like,
you want to
not
see him
getting
get away
caught.
with it, because this is the character you followed, as
Yeah.
horrible as he is.
then he gets in bed and he's able to be there, and he has the pencil on the door, so he's got all this stuff set up so that his mom comes in to make sure he's okay. And then they're gonna be so overjoyed by the fact that he's okay that they're not really you know thinking too critically about anything. But then he hears like the downstairs, either the police officer or EMT or whoever saying, "Oh, we got a live one," and you see his face like, "Oh no." And then it's the girl Ashley, because apparently like she had taken some of the duct tape and put it over her wound so she didn't bleed out completely.
yeah.
And that's how she survived.
Yeah, that's right.
And then
yeah.
you see her giving him the finger as she's
Yeah.
going to the ambulance.
Again, the film gives you another little turn at the end where you think like, okay, we're following him. That point is he gets away with it, and it's really dark. But then you get another little twist where it's
Yeah.
like, okay, she gets away with it and gives him the finger, and it's like the pacing of the film and the reveals and the twist, I think,
Yeah.
are just so well. Like, it's a really well structured film. Like, if you just want to break down the structure, it's very well done.
Well, then you have that element of, after seeing that, he then tells his mom that he thinks he needs to go to the hospital to see Ashley. So seemingly he wants to
Oh,
go to the
yeah,
hospital to try to be
yeah.
able to take care of her before
Yeah.
she can tell the police what happened. Because she's probably not telling him immediately right there in the ambulance what's happening, because she just wants to get out of there probably and get away. But then, like, so what's the sequel to this?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, based on the age of the kid and stuff, I don't know if there will be a sequel. And it's kind of a VOD.
And it was, apparently, I guess the date on there says 2016. Like you said, it had festival run. So
Yeah, like I'd heard about this months ago.
I'm just excited to see this director and writer do something else, because I really like, what he did with it. Like, he did not try to make he wanted to do I want to call this straightforward, because it's not like an art house film. He wanted to make this satisfying for mainstream horror fans, but also give something fresh. So I'm really hoping he gets the chance to do something else very soon.
Yeah, because so the director is Chris Peckover, and his co-writer was Zach Kahn, who helped write it. So like this team just took so the idea of a Home Alone but a horror film, but not in the way you would think, is a very smart take, because it's pretty much, it's not just even more horrific elements put into the exact same situation as Home Alone. It is, what if the bad guy in the movie was really Kevin Kevin? So you take that element and reverse it. I mean, luckily Home Alone didn't have the young boy Kevin trying to get the affection of some older woman or girl or whatever, but it's just like, okay, so somebody's booby trapped the house or set up these elaborate pranks or whatever, but they're the bad guy. And that was an interesting take, and one that I realized if you advertise it that way, you give away the twist. And you take away some of the surprise and some of the effectiveness of the film if you take the teeth out of it by taking that away. At the same time, if somebody wants to go in and see, based on the trailers, a movie where it's essentially just the killers from any home invasion film ever going into the house in Home Alone, then they're going to be upset because they're not getting what they wanted. So it's kind of a tough conundrum of like how much. And the other thing on trailers is you have to show something, because otherwise people aren't going to watch it. So you have to have some advertisement for it. So it's like a tough thing. And that's where I think streaming services can be a big savior for that type of film, because if they have trust in the filmmaker and the material, they don't have to screen. They can just put together a quick 30-second trailer and build buzz up about it, and then people will watch it. They're not beholden.
If it was something produced by them, like Netflix, you know what I mean, and they footed the bill, and they didn't just give the filmmakers $75,000 for it, and the filmmakers never got to see another dime. You know, that would be unfortunate. But yeah, if they want to do this type of film again, or it's something that was like twisted the genre a little bit, it would be great for somebody like Netflix to like give them the money, do it. Nobody will be super pissed off if it's not what they want in theaters, you know, like,
because I think the barrier there for watching something, so like even like Your Next, which I said was like in the same realm to me, kind of.
I think it is. It made me think of that film.
That one's more straightforward because there are twists, but it's more a character twist.
Yeah.
And this one's more of a twist in terms of what type of movie it is. And I think stuff like that on the streaming services can do well because you don't have to sell it to a traditional audience and do test screenings. You trust in the creators and make it. So if they make more stuff like this, and that's what, like, these big twists, you know, or these kind of genre blended films, I think streaming services will be a huge boon for them, because in theaters, like, horror comedy is a hard sell to a general audience because they're like, oh, it's not scary enough, I'm laughing, so I'm not scared, I don't want to see it. Even though some of the best horror films have effective laugh scenes and jokes in them, that even the ones that aren't horror comedies have humor, but like, people don't like things that aren't just one thing that they expect. So hopefully, like, these streaming services can like let these people test the waters of different things and not have to kowtow to the typical like demographics that you have to try to sell a movie to.
Yeah, when they're like, well, people aren't going to go see it if it's not this, this, and this. They don't want to pay money for it, you know?
Yeah, because
I mean, streaming things are a big shift in the film industry, and yeah, some people think, oh, they're ruining theaters or whatever, but they are opening up other avenues, I think, and more experimentation on some level.
Because unfortunately, I don't think a movie like this could get a big nationwide theatrical push without ruining what the twist is.
Yep.
And so it's one of those things where you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because even if it's a festival darling, you got to get people in the theater to see it, and it's got to be a captive audience that is kind of that genre fan. And to get them into the theater, you have to promote it, and you have to put money behind it.
You almost have to try to almost like rethink the trailer and almost shoot something separately that, you know, could even talk about the film, like Hitchcock did sometimes. You know what I mean? Like, talk about the film, like even just have somebody up there saying, we're not going to show you what happened because you won't believe what's going to happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Something to sell it in a different way where it's not the traditional format of a trailer.
It's a little bit of a conundrum. That's things I've thought about for our own projects, is like, if we were to make a feature and have kind of like these twisty genre elements, you want it to be revealed to the audience so they can experience it as you intend to unravel it in the film, but you have to put together a trailer that teases stuff, and it's just a tough thing to do. So with this movie, I can definitely see people going in with maladjusted expectations and being upset that it wasn't what they thought. But I went in with no expectations beyond knowing like there's something that happens that turns off some of the audience.
Yeah, I didn't even know that. I just knew it had a 91%. It was like, is this going to be a 91% film I'd like or don't like? I don't know. I heard, you know, the reviews are good. It's a Christmas film. It's December. Let's do it for the podcast.
Yeah, so I mean, like, I definitely enjoyed it, and I think this will probably have a good life on streaming services. Like I said, I would be interested to see, because I think in general, like I said, there's nothing out there. Like, unlike It Comes at Night, like, there's not ambiguity to the ending. It's a very straightforward movie. It's just like the twist wasn't what you thought. It wasn't, you know, the young kids defending the house against intruders. It was the kid orchestrating this terrible kind of like rape fantasy where he even had a roofie and stuff involved. And the only thing it kept making me think of when they said like, oh, she won't remember the next day, was Arrested Development, how Joe gave everybody forgive me, or
oh yeah,
was it forget me nows?
I think so.
Or forget me nots, or forgive me nows, or whatever, which were really just roofies. But he's like, you know, go to sleep, Michael, go to sleep. Like, where's Derek at for the Arrested Development reference? But then, like, just the movie, it's like, oh, it's this very sinister plan that unfortunately I could see somebody trying to do.
Yeah.
And just you have the entitlement of this kid who's, but then the funny thing is he turns around and it's such like a little dweeb because like he's like lets his mom baby him and all this stuff. And it's like, in the real world, there are these people who want to be all big and bad and get what they want. And then the second that, you know, they do get it or don't get it, then they just revert back to this default state that's being this really like dweeby person,
or just two-faced, you know. Very much like, you know, sociopaths that like can put on a front because they're just so manipulative, you know?
Yeah, so this is definitely a movie that I mean, like the concept. Once it was over and I realized what it was, like it was fun,
Very smart, you know, very fun twist.
And the element, like when Luke is dancing, or like at the end, like that is comedy, like when he's brushing his teeth and stuff.
Yeah.
And like there's all the carnage downstairs, so it's all something that was interesting. Like I said, I could just see people having issues with it just because of maladjusted expectations. So, but yeah, I think we discussed everything that happened in it.
Yeah, I mean, I really like that film. I hope more people see it before it's spoiled for them, you know, because it is one of those things you can't get back once it's spoiled for you.
Yeah, once you know the twist.
I really hope Derek watches it because I want to, only because I hope he enjoys it. You know what I mean? Like, I hope he watches it and enjoys it and likes it, and then we can talk about it for the year and stuff. But hopefully he's on board with it, just because it is a refreshingly new horror film that is very good, I think.
Yeah, and it's something we haven't seen before, so I definitely recommend.
It's the type of horror films I like to see. They you know, it's out of the art house realm, which I like the art house horror, but it's out of that realm.
Yeah,
but it also feels fresh. It feels mainstream yet fresh, which is a hard thing to do a lot of times.
So this is a movie that what you should do, horror fans, is once you've watched this, or assuming you listen to this, you've already seen the film. This is one that you then introduce somebody to that knows nothing about it, and then see what their reaction is.
Yeah.
And that's the fun of a lot of these types of movies, is introducing people to these movies you don't hear about. So yeah, I'd recommend.
I bought it when it was on sale for like $6 or $7. I think it's still almost that much to rent now, and it's gonna be like $10 to buy. You know, it's gonna be, if you're gonna pay that much to rent it anyway. For me personally, I'm glad I bought it. Again, I paid what the rental price is now, but this is a film that I will probably actually watch. I'm not going to say it's like going to make me feel like it's like, oh, I've got to watch this at Christmas.
Yeah.
You know, but I would rather watch this again next year than something like Krampus. And I liked Krampus quite a bit. I just something about this will be fun to watch again in a year, I think.
Yeah.
And then maybe like, you know, every now and then, especially to show people. I think this would be a good, if you had like a Christmas party with some friends that were in on this, that would be a fun movie to show them, I think.
Yeah. Yep. So better watch out. So do your duty and show it to some people if you enjoyed it. But so I think that wraps up our discussion on that. If you want to see all the news and information about things we got coming out, follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. All those can be found. You can find links to all those at houseofvideostore.com. If you're listening via iTunes, leave us a review there. That helps other people find the podcast. And based on the discussion we had at the beginning, if you have any strong feelings about the type of podcast content you like to listen to, just let us know that as well. Either you can send us an email at podcast@houseofvideostore.com or leave a comment on YouTube or Facebook or wherever you find it. So we always enjoy getting feedback on things like that. Like I said, keep an eye out on our social media because we will have at least one thing to announce in December. And unless this short film completely falls apart, that will be coming out at some point too.
We have a shoot date now, right?
Yeah, we have a shoot date locked down. So, and I'm planning to get everything.
You've got it kind of scripted out.
Yeah.
On a certain level.
And I'm planning to try to get everything aside from that edited and kind of ready to go so I can drop the other stuff in and get it all done relatively quickly. So it'll be out by mid-December, hopefully. And then the other news will be mid-December as well. So keep an eye out for that. Then social media, make sure you follow us on Instagram at HBTVS_official because we post pictures and stuff there. Like I know I posted a picture of this cool Freddy Krueger Nightmare on Elm Street pinball machine that was at this place called Rec Bar here in town. And I saw. And
definitely subscribe on YouTube though.
Yeah, follow us on YouTube.
The big thing.
Yes, follow us on YouTube because that's where the short films we posted in addition to Facebook as well. We'll post things there, but YouTube and Facebook are important. But yeah, and then to follow us specifically on the internet, my new Twitter account, or not a new one, but the one I'm using now is just my name at William Cap, so you can follow me there. But following the official House of Video Store stuff, I'll probably post more there than my own.
I can't get at Sean Blevins. I've been trying to for a long time. It's some guy that registered it and hasn't used it in years. And I've tweeted him a couple of times, and I keep looking up, when do Twitter deactivate accounts? So, because they do after a little while.
Yeah.
Mine's at Blevins Sean.
Well, yeah, because like my name account, I locked that down years ago, like 2008, and I just didn't use it. And then I got tired of my old account, and I was like, it's so hard to go back and like see what you said 5 years ago. It's like, I don't need this account, so I just deleted it because it's easier for people just to find me by searching for my name. Especially if I go in like other people's podcasts or whatever. So, but yeah, I mean, like I post I would like just following our other social media accounts for House by Video Store is more effective to see what's going on with us. But yeah, so I think that'll wrap up this episode of the House by Video Store podcast. Thanks for listening.